When reflecting on the 1960s civil rights and human rights struggle, we often think of such figures as Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, Rosa Parks, but one woman's name is rarely mentioned. A woman who worked her whole life for the fundamental principle that all men and women are created equal. That woman is Amelia Boynton Robinson. Born in 1911 in Savannah, Georgia, by the age of 9, Amelia was traveling the countryside with her mother, urging their fellow African Americans, mostly sharecroppers, to register to vote. The concept of voting today carries almost no hint of danger, but in the 1920s, women had only just been granted the constitutional right to vote, and the fear of blacks voting for their own representatives was enough to cause lynchings and murders throughout the South. Despite the dangers involved, Amelia and her husband, Sam Boynton, lived their lives according to a simple belief that a voteless people is a hopeless people. When Amelia and Sam moved to Selma, Alabama in 1928, they took over the Dallas County Voters League after its founder, C.J. Adams, was jailed and then forced out of Selma. From 1928 until 1963, the Dallas County Voters League registered only handfuls of African Americans to vote. This was not due to lack of interest, but rather to disenfranchisement and threats of retaliation. As representatives of the NAACP in Alabama, which in the 1950s had been effectively banned by law, Sam and Amelia were under constant threat, not only from the White Citizens Council and the Ku Klux Klan, but from the legal authorities of the South. In the spring of 1963, as Sam Boynton lay dying in a hospital in Selma, suffering declining health from a lifetime of beatings and harassment, he demanded of his wife, "I want you to make sure that every Negro in Dallas County is registered to vote," something that still seemed impossible despite 35 years of trying. But Sam Boynton's funeral became the launching point for a new generation of activists from the student wing of Martin Luther King's nonviolent civil rights crusade. It was Amelia Boynton Robinson who made the appeal to Dr. King to join the voting rights crusade that she and her husband had begun in Dallas County. King sent his most courageous lieutenants, including the Reverend James Bevel, Diane Nash, and Bernard Lafayette, to go to what many considered the most dangerous city in the South, Selma. Amelia's house on Lapsley Street was the command center for the campaign. Whether you were Martin Luther King, James Baldwin, Dick Gregory, a congressman, or a janitor, the only place in Selma where you and other civil rights activists were welcome at the beginning of the struggle was the Boynton Home and Insurance Office. When in February of 1965, Reverend James Bevel and others would propose, in response to the killing of 26-year-old voting rights activist Jimmy Lee Jackson, that there should be a march from Selma to Montgomery. That march, the Battle of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, would become known as Bloody Sunday and would represent Amelia Boynton Robinson's and the movement's finest hour. On Sunday, March 7, 1965, about 700 people gathered at Brown Chapel AME Church. Andrew Young, Hosea Williams, John Lewis, James Bevel, and other of King's lieutenants waited to hear from King whether or not to risk the dangerous protest. But one lifelong resident of Selma reported hundreds of people were standing around outside Brown Chapel. Ms. Boynton, Marie Foster, Reese, and others were determined that there was going to be a march if there wasn't anybody out there but them. Amelia Boynton Robinson was tear-gassed, beaten unconscious, and left for dead. To this day, her throat suffers irritation from that day's tear-gassing. But that Bloody Sunday would become one of the most famous days in all of American history, not only because of its violence, but even more because of America's response to that violence. That night, about 1,000 people from all over the country arrived in Selma. 1 week later, Martin Luther King would lead personally a march of about 7,000 people that would also be turned around at the bridge. But the next day, March 15, 1965, in a joint session of Congress, President Lyndon Johnson would say,
"But rarely in any time does an issue lay bare the secret heart of America itself. Rarely are we met with a challenge, not to our growth or abundance, or our welfare or our security, but rather to the values and the purposes and the meaning of our beloved nation. The issue of equal rights for American Negroes is such an issue. And should we defeat every enemy, and should we double our wealth and conquer the stars, and still be unequal to this issue, then we will have failed as a people and as a nation. For with a country as with a person, what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" There is no Negro problem. There is no Southern problem. There is no Northern problem. There is only an American problem.
Johnson would subsequently see to the passage of the Voting Rights Act, and he would sign that act into law on August 6th of 1965. It was the consummation for Amelia of her life's work. Eventually, many of the young civil rights workers would grow old and pass from the stage of history. But Amelia Boynton Robinson would continue her crusade against injustice. Today, on the world stage, she has spoken out in the cause for human rights in Germany, Italy, Iran, and many other nations with her organization, the Schiller Institute. At home, Amelia is the founding inspiration of the Alabama-based Village of Hope, whose mission is to identify disadvantaged and wayward children who are likely to fall through the societal cracks. Their vision is to establish a village residence for homeless and disadvantaged youth, to teach children self-love, civic responsibility, and life preparation skills in a village school setting, and to establish employment opportunities to render youth independent, self-sufficient, and ethnically proud. Let us now praise this woman who embodies more than 100 years of the wise, the beautiful, and the fierce in the American soul. Let us now praise Amelia Boynton Robinson.